All right, so we'll call our meeting to order. The roll call would show that 3 of us are here in person and 4 of us are on Zoom. The first matter is presentation. I talked to Ing. I'd like to introduce Kat Morgan.
I have a question. Francesca, do we officially have to have everybody say they're present?
Oh,
Like, take the roll.
that's silly, I think.
Silly, but I don't know if it's required. So Francesca, do you know?
I don't know.
I don't think it's required.
I don't either.
Anyway, let's move on to the presentation.
Okay, great.
I signed up for, my wife and I signed up for a course at CSUMB through OLLI, Older Living and Learning or whatever. And Kat gave a great presentation on all the murals in Monterey County. Actually, it was a 3-part session and went all the way from North County down to South County and did just a great job. So I talked to her about giving a presentation only on the murals within the city of Monterey. And we had an opportunity to walk. We both got out of bad snowstorms last week, but we walked this week through downtown. So Kat, I'm going to turn it over to her. She's going to give a presentation on some of the existing murals in the city of Monterey. And then we looked at some possible sites for future murals. I do want to throw in one little ad lib that Old Monterey Foundation, a nonprofit group which raises money for projects in the downtown and Lower Presidio. That's our project this year, to put together some murals in the downtown area. So we hope we have some money set aside and we hope to get some grants to actually implement these. So I'll turn it over to you, Kat.
Great, thank you. It's good to be with you all today. I'm going to do a screen share so that I can share my, but I can't share. I was going to share my slides, but it says the host has disabled screen sharing. So
I think we have to give you permission.
Yeah,
don't we?
Francesca probably can change that.
Can you
yeah,
see again?
that's my bad. I didn't get here early enough for us to test that. So there we go. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And make sure, are you seeing the
Yep.
review? Okay, I'm going to go into the slides. And what I'm going to do
Get that on?
is-
Now is it okay?
No, it says got it or leave meeting.
Oh.
Yeah.
are you seeing the slides?
Oh, yes.
You
Yeah.
are? Okay, good.
Thank you.
What I'm going to do is walk through some of these murals in the city of Monterey and the walls that Bill and I looked at yesterday, and I had looked at prior, and I think he had looked at prior, that we think would look really great with some murals. And I'm not going to show every single mural in the city of Monterey. I haven't even seen all of the murals in the city, partly because some of them are indoors in schools and places that are harder to get to under COVID. But because we were really concentrating on the downtown area and then on the bike path, I'm going to focus on those murals. And I'm going to ask you while I show you these images to notice patterns in what they look like, what's depicted, the impression they make on you, and just because I'd like to have a little conversation about sort of what you feel these murals are saying to visitors and to residents in our community. And feel free to ask me any questions at any point. So I became a mural hunter, as I call myself. I had already been really interested in murals and loved looking at them before COVID, but when I moved here, it was during the very first part of the pandemic. And I really missed the opportunity to go into galleries and museums and enjoy visual art. So I started noticing right away all the murals in our county. And I found at this point over 500 murals just in Monterey County. And one of the things I really appreciate about murals is that they do a bunch of different things. They give artists a livelihood, which I think is really important. But murals themselves tell stories. They reflect values of community. Often you'll see murals sharing stories of the origin of that place or the founding of that place or the founders of that place. And they can change our perspective. And I mean that both literally. Just think about the last time you stood in front of a large mural and felt very small because what you were looking at, maybe a bird, that was normally much smaller than you is now 4 or 5 times as large as you. So they can literally change our perspective, but they can also change perspective by changing what we focus on as a collective as we walk down a street. So they inject a story or an image into street life or into a classroom or into a square and bring those visuals in and that artist's vision in, so they can change our perspective. And that's one of the things I like most about murals. I'm going to show you some things you might not think of as murals first. These are a couple of the original colonial murals in the Royal Presidio Chapel. If you've not been there, go. When they renovated and restored it not too many years ago, they left some of the original artwork visible, so visitors can go in and actually see these panels where you can see artwork that was created. Probably, we don't know the names of the artists, but these were images that were probably created by indigenous people who may not have been willing. They may have been forced to create this artwork. These images are among the oldest murals that remain in our county, and we're fortunate enough to have them, just a short walk from downtown. So I really encourage people to check them out. We also have a lot of WPA era art in our county, and these two mosaics, you've probably seen them. They're in the downtown Monterey post office on either side, and they show these historic scenes. They were created back in 1933, so they were early WPA artworks. And then this is the mural that you're probably most familiar with. What I do sometimes is just Google mural and then the name of a city to see what I can find. And this is typically one of the first things that will pop up when you put in mural in Monterey. I know many of you probably remember when it was reinstalled at the convention center. I did not move here before it was reinstalled. I've only been here since it's in its current location, but it was gone for a couple of years at least and then reinstalled. And I gather there were family members of the artist who were part of the group that began the reinstallation. It's an incredible mural. And I really recommend, if you haven't taken a look at it recently, go back and just spend some time. It tells a whole story. This part of it, the centerpiece, there's a lot of humor in it too. And then kitty corner across the street is Troya's mural, which has been there I don't know how long. And if any of you know the name of the artist who created this particular work or any of the other works I show that I don't know the name of the artist, I would really appreciate it, because I always like giving the artist credit, and I don't know who created this one. This is another WPA era artist, although this was created after the WPA, many years after. But this is at Bruce Arras Way, and this is one of the only remaining Bruce Arras murals that we have the opportunity to see. It's pretty weathered, it's outdoors, but he created a whole art gallery there in the 80s and then again in the 90s. And actually, I think it was last year, a bunch of the murals that artists created that were depicted in that area were auctioned off in London. So some of the murals that were there for outside for a while in that little gallery he created are still in existence, and some lucky collector has purchased them last year in an auction. And then this one, if you walk on the rec trail, you'll have seen it. This is a more recent mural. It's 2015, I think. But again, a historic depiction. This one is on laminate, so it'll last longer than some, even though it's being exposed to the elements all the time, being right along the bike path. And then you've probably all seen this one many times. This one, the artist, Art Simons, told me that he said he thinks it's the most regulated mural in Monterey County because he had to go before at least 5 governing bodies to get the permissions needed to paint this, because it was in a protected marine area, so close to the water. And so to make sure that all of the protections for the ocean were satisfied, he had to fill out paperwork and go before 5 different governing bodies. So most of the time, 5 governing bodies isn't necessary to support a mural. And it's one of the things that I always think about the artists and how many layers of bureaucracy they have to navigate in order to create a work of art. It can slow that process down. But this is an exquisite mural, and it weathers beautifully. And so all of that planning really paid off. And the way they kept the rust in it really adds to the texture and the quality and the visual of this one. I think this is probably one of the most photographed murals in our county. And then there are 4 John Stearny murals along Cannery Row Recreation Trail area. 3 of them that he did in 2008 and 1 that he did in, I think it was 2019. And so I'm just going to share those now. These are historic, but from a different period, you know, the John Steinbeck era. He based these on historic photographs. John Stearny, these are a little atypical for him. Typically, he does those large murals standing out in a field somewhere off the side of a highway. But these he was commissioned to do, and they put them along the recreation trail so visitors could enjoy them. That's John in front of one of his murals. And then this small image here of the worker pushing the Carmel Canning Company cans. That's also a self-portrait John included in that mural. That's the most recent of those 4. And then this one I included because even though it's not by rights a mural, it has a lot of what I call mural features. You know, it's hand painted. It uses some topography that's very stylized to convey a certain mood, certain feel. There's detail and symbols and motifs in it that when you look at it from a distance, you know it's the name of the business, it's the name of the building, but those little features that are added really make it visually really pleasing and interesting. And so I go back and forth between whether I consider this a mural or not, but it certainly employs a lot of the features of a mural. And I love the owl in this one. It's one of my favorite parts of that. This one is one, again, if you know who created this one, please let me know. I have been trying for over a year now to find out the name of the artist for this one. I have not been successful so far, but I've seen this one referred to as banned on camera. I don't know if that's just a descriptor or if that's the actual title that someone gave it, that someone who knows who the artist is. And then this is, I think, the last mural I'm going to share for now. This is at the Golden Gate Theater, or originally the State Theater. And I think, Bill, there's some plans to create a new mural at this site. Isn't that correct?
That's correct. We did work with the previous owner on sort of a composite of these 2 different murals, and we were getting ready to submit to the city when that owner sold it to the current owner, Igor Gavrik.
So we're hopeful that there will be a mural there at some point. I think this is the last one. So then this one, this is another, if you know who the artist is, please let me know, or the date. There's a great deal of description to the left. You can see some of it in this image, which is essentially a map and a key guiding you to telling you which historic buildings are depicted in this image, this map of the city. But there's no signature. And that's one of the things I always find really interesting about murals is often there isn't a signature, and it takes some digging to find out who created the mural. Muralists, contemporary muralists, I think often are using their signature. It's often their Instagram handle. It's a way for people to find out more about them, to contact them, but it also is a way for them to get credit for their work. But it's sometimes really difficult to find out who created a mural because it's a public art piece, but there's no signature.
But this mural is based on a painting that Thomas Larkin had commissioned so he could show off his house. So,
yes, it
so
definitely does that.
We know who the original artist was. I don't know who did this part, but the painting was originally done, I believe, in the 1850s. But
1842.
1842. Thank you.
That's when that's Sloat's, or not Sloat, Casby
Larkin.
Jones
Yeah.
seizing Monterey.
Thank you.
Is that what that is?
Yeah, so all of those are the American ships in 1842 when Casby Jones came and seized Monterey. There's another lithograph is from the ocean perspective, and both of those are hanging in Colton Hall, not the originals, but copies of them.
Thank you. That's very helpful. That will take me a long way toward, as you know, with the internet, the more keywords you can clump together, the more likely you are to come up with an answer to the question. And so I'll be able to use that information to try to find out who the artist is, because I really want to, I document murals on Instagram through Murals of Monterey County, and I really want to make sure I'm crediting the artist. And so I do a lot of legwork to try to find out who the artist is before I post. And then when I do post images where I don't know who the artist is, I'm always hoping that someone will see it and will be able to give me either a clue like you have now, or give me the actual name of the artist and something about who commissioned the work. So thank you for that. So I'm curious now, just to take a quick pause, what patterns and trends did you notice in the murals that I shared? And I want you to think in terms of colors and styles and themes and content, but also what's missing or who's missing from the murals that you saw. And I don't just mean the murals I didn't show you, but of the murals you saw, what are you noticing is included or not?
Most of them have some historic content.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a pretty common thing, especially for, you know, original capital cities, for historic places, places with historic downtowns. Every place has history, but then there are places that get referred to as Old Monterey or Old Town, and therefore the history is really baked into the sense of place and the identity and the reason people come. So these murals are clearly tapping into that. Any other observations?
I didn't see a lot of women.
Yeah.
That's who's missing. I don't know.
Yeah, that's definitely part of who I notice is missing too. There are certain stories that are told over and over. Like there's a meme that a local muralist put out recently where he talks about what stories get told in the murals and the calls for artists in our county. And one of them is John Steinbeck's story. And one of them is sometimes stories about the origin of the city. And those stories get told frequently, but then there are other stories that do not get told. Any other things you noticed?
Well, you didn't have any of the murals that are on some of the utility boxes.
Yes, you're right. I have not focused on the utility boxes for a bunch of different reasons. One is I found it exceptionally hard to keep track of them. They're smaller, they're easier to miss, sometimes harder to find. But I have typically focused, when I focus on walls or ceilings, and sometimes the floor, like in the art park in Sand City, there's one on the ground. But you're right, yes, I didn't include those. Any other things you noticed?
So I would say it was really great to see all of those. I think the mural on the side of the conference center really tried to be comprehensive in terms of all the different peoples involved in Monterey, and also it is more contemporary. You know, it has our origins, but then also tries to be more contemporary as well, I think. But I would say that there are so many different ethnic groups that have been really significant for Monterey, and maybe we saw more kind of the focus on Spanish colonial times, as opposed to some of the other ethnic groups, Filipinos, Japanese, Chinese, Portuguese, all the different people that helped with Monterey, and also the whole kind of fishing industry, although there might be more, and Tim would know if there are more murals that kind of capture that aspect of our history.
Oh, Kat, were you going to show some of the potential sites for new murals?
Yes, I am. I'm going to shift gears now. One of the things that I noticed when I was putting this together is just how much sepia tones were predominant in so many of the murals. Even the history tile mural, which has blues and grays, they're very muted tones. And I started noticing that the most contemporary murals, which I'll end with, have a lot more range of color. They all have color, obviously. Even the one that's a complete sepia tone reproduction of a painting. They all have color, but the color palette is more limited. And I thought that was really fascinating, because then when you start looking at the walls, like we are here, this is the one facing that painting that we were just talking about. The walls and the whole tone of the colors of the city are very similar to those murals, and so they blend in a way. Which makes it easier for people to accept them if they're not immediately going to jump on the mural bandwagon. So Bill, at any point, if you want to comment on any of these are some of the walls that I think are blank canvases waiting for an artist to be given the go-ahead to paint.
Is that the same wall? I'm sorry, on that last slide, is that the same wall, just a different view? Or if not, then where is that one on the left?
This is that courtyard right next to Revival, and there's two walls, and that little courtyard has
Opposite.
a building. Yeah, so those are the walls facing that courtyard.
Yeah.
And then the library, I gather there's some plans possibly for the library to have a mural.
We thought with the Museum of Art, I mean, they already have that sculpture garden, which is actually a city park, but that possibly one of the vertical elements that they could put a mural there.
Yeah, one of the things that's interesting is to look at each of the square spaces as a separate canvas, or to look at the whole building. If you follow muralists, you'll see there are muralists who wrap an entire building with a mural. There are others who will just use part of a space. There are buildings that are covered with multiple murals. There are walls that only a part of the wall, maybe above the car level, is where the murals are. And I understand this parking lot may be developed. So there's a mural in this parking lot right now on the lower level along the back wall.
It's my understanding, Inga, that the city actually was in the process of getting possible murals put on the facade of the Kelly P Garage as part of the 250th celebration of our birthday. But I know now that is one of the possibilities. The city's looking at that as a housing project, and that parking lot may or may not parking structure may or may not come down.
Right, and the mural that's inside that parking structure is being painted over.
That's what I was afraid of. That's why I took pictures of it yesterday. When I
Yeah.
saw the sign that said painting, I had this feeling. I didn't want to think about it, but I took pictures of it because I had a feeling we might be seeing it on its last day.
Right, we did some research and we didn't find anything about it in our records. And our previous museums manager had said that it didn't have any historic significance we were aware of. So that's being painted over.
Yeah, I actually didn't include it on purpose because I had a feeling it was being painted over when I saw the signs.
Yeah.
It always makes me sad, even though when I talk to muralists, often they're resigned to the fact that murals are temporary, and that often they last only a season. They may last only a year. We had 2 murals painted in the museum for an exhibit this past year, and they're both gone because they were part of the exhibit. One of the things that I like to encourage people to think about is not just large walls, but enclosed spaces, and what a mural could create in terms of the feeling in a space. There's a couple of little alleyways, pedestrian alleyways in Carmel, that have vines and butterflies and flowers have been painted on the wall. So you get this sense of walking into a garden area as you walk towards something where there's green and growing. And there's lots of things like that people can do, create those little extra features that give some ambiance to a space. Bill, I think this is one of the walls you said there was a project in mind.
Yeah, actually, that's the north side of the McCone Center of, it's just a block away from here, right? For MIIS. And we had talked to them last year. They have a little art subcommittee, and we have talked to them. We were kicking around the idea that could reflect the language capital of the world. And so they are thinking of that. And I think they would like to proceed. This is right where they closed off Pierce Street. So they're, that's going to be a little center for MIIS for the students. They have some tables out there on the vacated street. So I think this one probably might be the very first one that Old Monterey Foundation could proceed with helping them with a design and then submittal to the city.
Awesome. And then I shared this one because I feel like this is a really interesting wall. It's got multiple textures, the different colored glass, the different surfaces behind the glass. And it's a really interesting building. And I started imagining what it would be like if there were murals or if there were painted features added to this building and how it would change the feel of the building. Some historic preservationists would be shuddering at what I say, but I am a proponent of murals, so I'm gonna risk offending some folks by making suggestions like that. This is another building that when I looked at, I thought this building to me just I can imagine the power it would have if an entire wrap mural, I don't know if that's the right word for it, a mural that wraps the building was created. It's incredibly beautiful building, and I also think that a mural could really heighten that. But when you do what I've been doing now, mural hunting for a couple of years, I start looking at every blank wall as a canvas. And there are lots of different ways of responding to canvases. Some artists paint very muted tones and heighten the features that are already on a wall, and others create something that's very different and bold and different from what's around them, but also what's already on that building. So I wanna just plant a couple of seeds because I know history, sharing the history, preserving the history, and interpreting the history of Monterey is a really important part of the life of our city, Monterey, the city of Monterey, and the visitors who come are often coming to learn about the history. Kids come with school groups to learn about the history. Tourists are coming to explore the past, but stories and history can be told in so many different ways. There can be many different colors included in the telling of those stories and the history, lots of styles and fonts, different sizes. There could be a series of smaller murals that tell stories like there are in the square, in the tile work. I don't know if you are familiar with the tile work that's in that square. There's plants, flora, fauna, and history all told there in beautiful tile work by the artist whose last name is Swift, does hand painted tile. Which is really fitting with a lot of the themes and patterns in Monterey, but also is something really different because it's showing the natural world. Also, many points of view, and I don't know now who it was who pointed out who was not showing up in these images, but we can tell the same story from multiple points of view, and it won't necessarily sound like the same story. And I think that's an important role for those of us who think about public history, to really keep in mind that there are lots of different ways of approaching the same stories and making sure that it's a full recollection. And then for me, especially here with the economy depending so much on the natural world, both through fishing and canning and whaling historically, but also now through tourism, I think it's really important for us to think about public art and the messages public art can share about the natural world and about the preservation of the natural world. And so those are things that I would like to plant those seeds to help people think about when you're considering murals for the future. Thinking about, even if history is still going to be the centerpiece of those murals, how can those murals share history in new and different ways? And now my final few images are murals that have been created in the last couple of years in downtown Monterey. And these murals actually do address some of the things that we all pointed out were missing. Their use of color is different. Their styles are different. Who's included and what's included is different. And I'm just going to share a few images. This one, unfortunately, from what I understand, Cult Taco is not going to reopen. I don't know that it opened at all before COVID, but these murals were painted by Ricardo Angelis in 2019 when the restaurant was new. I moved here after COVID started, and so I don't know if it ever did open. But these two are in the little entryway, and you can see them as long as the light is good. They're really unique, different, and really exceptional murals here in Monterey. This is a ceiling mural over at the Dolly Museum. This is done by the La Neta crew. They are a crew of 5 muralists who are all local. They've been growing their body of work as individual artists, but also as a team. And this mural is really exceptional in lots of different ways. It's directly above you, but as you can see, the perspective is that these figures, these people are walking on the water that we are standing beneath. So it's a really interesting use of perspective in a mural. It's a really beautiful mural. I recommend going and just standing there and taking it in. This one was done in 2021, also by the La Neta crew. It's in Papachanos across the street from the earlier mural, the Cult Taco mural. And then this is one of the newest murals, and I understand, yes, I was gonna say, it looks like you have part of it behind you, Tim. It echoes what's behind you. I love this mural. I did not know about this mural until Bill told me about it, and I went yesterday and got to see it, and I love this mural. This mural is really different from most of the other murals in the city. The use of color, but the movement in the mural and the way I happen to be lucky enough to arrive when the shadow of the picket fence just perfectly added some depth to the mural. And so this is a great mural. C.V. Brummond is the artist. I found
Heather Seavey. Well, you're right, both.
Say that again?
Her name is Heather Seavey, but she also goes by the other name as well. That's her mother's name, right?
Yes, and I, like I said, I try to credit the artist. So I went and found, went down a bunch of rabbit holes to find this image with an artist name, and C.V. Brummond is how this artist identifies herself on Instagram. Often on Instagram, the name someone uses isn't their name they maybe go by in other ways, but usually I tag them to make sure that that's how they want to be credited. And this is a terrific mural. If you haven't seen it, I would encourage you to go see it. And then this last one is by Arsenio Baca, who's one of the members of the La Neta crew. He was the artist who was awarded when Peter B's Brew Pub put out their call for artists. They wanted to put a mural on this wall. He was the artist they awarded it to, and he executed this mural. And they're a brew pub, so he's got hops, and he's got the kegs, and he's got cards because people play cards there. It's a really interesting use of color and scale. It plays with our perspective quite a bit. I really, really like this mural. So when I went, I had all of the people who were sitting in front of it move out of my way. I came early, so I wasn't just disturbing people as they were into their evening. But I love that mural. So I want to thank you for the time and attention. And if you have any questions or know anything about any of the murals I shared, or about any new murals or forthcoming murals, I would love to hear about it.
Thank you so much, Kat. So this is a presentation. Obviously, we can't take any action, and there's no action to be taken, but I don't know if anybody has any individual comments or questions.
I have just one thing about the mural at the JCL. We're going to, on January 22nd, we're going to sort of do an unveiling of the mural. And Heather actually will be here. She's coming up from Mexico City to be part of that. She lives in Mexico today. And we'll be reopening our museum, and we're putting in a brand new garden. It'll be right in front of that mural also. And that'll be open on the 22nd.
What time?
1 o'clock.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I'll show up. I'll
Any
take pictures.
comments? Inga, maybe you could put this just for general discussion on an upcoming agenda. We can invite Kat back, and the commission could talk and give their comments and opinions in more detail.
Yeah, and I'm also happy to, if there are questions or a desire for information about murals in other parts of the city, or more detail about any of the murals or any of that, I'm happy to do that kind of research, or to share the research I've done, because this is a passion for me. I'm teaching other classes on murals, and so I'm always learning more and also asking questions about murals. So if you guys have questions about murals and you think I might be able to be helpful in answering them, I'd be happy to be part of that process. Anything I can do to help promote and spread and encourage more public art, I'm happy to do it.
Well, and you're talking to the right body, because this
Yep.
commission is the Museums and Cultural Arts Commission, and we're going to be working on a public art master plan. So it's really great to have your inventory that you're working on. And what I don't know, since I wasn't involved in the kind of nitty-gritty inventory of public art, I don't know how much documentation we have on murals that are not on city property. So I'm kind
Yeah.
of looking at
And I'm happy to add to that and either take up research questions or provide information, or at least the sources. I'm pretty good about identifying where I learned what I learned. So I can go back and fact check myself if I discover I was wrong.
And Mike has a comment.
Yes, thank you. I also heard the Ollie talk that Kat gave, and I really want to say how much we appreciate the work that she's really done an amazing job of documenting and doing a thorough job. But I had one little question, Kat, on the murals, the indigenous people's work in the Presidio Chapel. You made a little remark which I didn't perhaps follow, or perhaps I'm something about forced to do.
Mm-hmm. So
what are you saying here?
So from the research that I've done, I always try to identify the artist. And in some cases with Mission and the chapel from that era, in some cases there are named artists. And some of those artists are Colonial, some of those artists are indigenous people. And in some cases, the artists are not named. And from the reading I did, and there was a seminar that had been recorded that I viewed that was talking about documenting mission art and renovating missions and understanding that whole process of how the missions were built and then decorated. One of the questions was, how do we know who created the art? And often the answer was, if we don't know, if it's not a named artist, there's a good chance the person who created that art was an enslaved indigenous person. They were an artist, or they were someone who didn't identify as an artist, but was brought in, not by choice, not paid, not compensated, to create the art. And they may have been working with an artist, may not have been a named artist. But that it wasn't that they said, hey, I'm an artist, I'd like to paint this. It was much more likely that there was coercion involved, either because they were not compensated, they had no choice, or they were actually enslaved. And so the historical record doesn't always facilitate naming the artists. And that's one of the things I want to do. And so I say that because when I was looking into what the renovation process was like, nowhere could I find any artists named who they attributed those murals in the Presidio to. There are other murals in missions that they can name the artists. In some cases, those were indigenous artists who were not enslaved, not participating against their will. But in other cases, they name artists, and then it's not clear whether the artist is being named because they knew who they were and they paid them and compensated them as an artist, or if they're naming them because they knew who they were, but that person didn't participate as a willing member of an artistic team. So I hope that
you're discriminating somehow between artists and craftsmen there, I believe.
Yes, and I'm also trying to credit the people who execute the work, and also acknowledge that sometimes the people who execute the work are not necessarily doing so of their own free will.
Great. Maybe you can discuss that offline. We have to move on with the rest of our agenda. But we do have to open it up to the public. Are there any questions from the public on this item?
To make a public comment using Zoom, please virtually raise your hand by clicking on the raise hand button in your Zoom toolbar. If you dialed in by phone, raise your hand by pressing *9 and then unmute yourself by dialing *6. There are no public comments
right.
at this time.
Thanks again, Kat. We'll
Thank
move on
you.
to our agenda.
Thank you.
The consent calendar is the approval of the minutes. Any questions or changes on any of the minutes? If not, can we have a motion to approve?
I'll move that we approve the minutes.
Second,
No, we have a second.
Kimber. So we have O'Neill first and then Kim,
Yeah.
Pika second. And then
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I do-
Anybody opposed?
For the roll call, for the motion, I do. Sorry. Castagna,
You're muted.
He's muted.
The bureaucracy.
okay. Sorry. Okay. well,
Yes.
Yes, okay. O'Neill,
Yes.
Peak,
Yes.
Sovereign,
Yes,
Thomas,
Yes.
Evans,
yes.
and then Wachowski.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you. Are there any, so now next item on our agenda is public comments, just opening it up to the public for any matter that's not on the agenda.
Yes, and to join the meeting on Zoom Gov, use the link or phone number on the agenda at isearchmonterey.org. To join by telephone, dial toll-free 833-568-8864, enter meeting ID 161-622-2299, followed by the #. This meeting is also streamed live on the city's YouTube account at youtube.com/City of Monterey with an approximate 10-second delay, and on Comcast channel 25 with up to a 90-second delay. Public comment, please raise your hand or dial *9. There are no public comments at this time. No public comments.
All right, Inga, then will you start the discussion on the,
Sure, on the activity report. So I know everybody's read through the activity report, and I think the main highlight, the huge accomplishment, and the public recognition that I'd like to give is the work on Christmas in the Adobes and having pulled it off this year with such a small staff. And the credit goes, the bulk of the credit goes to Jordan Leninger, who pieced it all together. And then I know he had a lot of help from Francesca, and even one of our librarians pitched in. And then, of course, commissioners helped. And then we had a bunch of volunteers. So I think it was a tremendous job, given that we were doing it in a pandemic. And also given that Jordan hadn't been the lead in Christmas in the Adobes in the past. But because of the people that went before him and the records they kept and so forth, and the inclusiveness that I think museum staff has always had in keeping everybody involved. He pulled it off, and from the outside, I think people just really enjoyed it and saw it as a seamless, really positive event. So huge thank you to Jordan. And then Jordan, if there are any other, I guess I do want to mention that there's an exhibit opening at the museum, Monterey Museum of Art, opening, and I don't have the date on me, but I hope it's in the packet. Anyway, and one of our city paintings is going to be in that exhibit, and it's Fitzgerald Sea Coast, because there's going to be a Fitzgerald exhibit opening later this month. And I know the painting was just picked up yesterday and hung in the museum, so that's excellent. And then if there are any other quick highlights that you want to mention, Jordan, please do so.
Sure. I mean, a majority of my time spent for November and December was focused on Christmas in the Adobes. And again, thank you to Francesca and Sean at the library for helping out. We had a lot of fun. Just going on Christmas in the Adobes, we had about 1,167 visitors compared to 1,755 in 2019. So we were about 600 short. And I think that is due to the fact that both nights the event sold out, but there were such large lines at some of the smaller adobes where they could only have 5 people come in at a time, that a lot of people, I think, spent more time in line to go to some of the other places that are not usually open, like the First Theater. So with that, that is a very impressive number, like, to come in during a pandemic, and we never had to restrict people coming in. We just had a good steady flow, and so I'm happy on how that came out. But on the side of when I was not focused on Christmas in the adobes, let's see. I mean, that was the bulk of my report, so I apologize. We had our first event at the Pacific Biological Laboratories in November. The Monterey Bay Fisheries and Trust had their annual donor thank you party at the lab, and due to COVID restrictions, they had to improvise on how they worked the event. So they had all food and beverage outside instead of inside like they normally would. And so that event was a success. Thank you to Nat for being the city representative for that event. And let's see, and then I guess I've been keeping everything just going. You may have heard before when you came in, one of our museum attendants is leaving us, Tyler Markley. He has obtained a full-time position with California State Parks in Sonoma. And so about mid-month, he will be heading up that way. And so I would like to personally thank Tyler for all his hard work of keeping Colton Hall open during the pandemic while working at State Parks here in Monterey. And so we're currently trying to figure out how to replace Tyler. So that'll be some fun stuff for Inga and I to go over soon. But while doing all the Christmas in the Adobes prep, I got to go on KRML's Pub Talk. I had done that in 2019, talking about the archives crawl. And so I went on December 1st and talked about all 3 museums, because at that point, all 3 museums had been open now, and talked about just Christmas in the Adobes. So always grateful for the gentleman there for having me on just to promote everything that we're doing. And then lastly, I got to give a private tour of the lab to a rock star, which I don't get to say often, but a band called The Killers. The drummer lives in Pebble Beach, and he's a big Steinbeck fan. So we were able to set up a tour for him in the lab, and he loved it. And he sounds like he would like to do some things to help maybe promote it in the future, and maybe even record some music there. But other than that, actually, I would like to thank the Monterey Pacific Rotary for the 16th year, 16th year, but 15th, semantics, because they didn't do it last year, or they did actually do it. Yeah, 16th year in a row, I'm sorry. They decorated Colton Hall, putting up the Christmas tree, or decorating the Christmas tree, making the wreaths and the garland out front. And so we're very grateful for their help of getting that set up and making Colton Hall look spectacular for the holidays. And I think that's about it.
Right. Any questions from any of the commissioners? All right.
I did have something I wanted to add, which is, so we only have 2 museum attendants, paid museum attendants for Colton Hall, and we're losing one of them. So 50% of our workforce for Colton Hall is leaving. So this is a good opportunity to say, if anybody knows somebody who would be interested in it's a few hours a week, and you get to interpret the history of Colton Hall to the public, to please go ahead and contact me or Jordan. And we are going to be probably opening up a recruitment if we don't just find somebody coming forward in the next week or so. And the other thing is we are struggling with our coverage for the other museums, which are covered with volunteers. And so again, if you're interested in volunteering at Pacific Biological Lab to help do tours once a month there, or at the Lower Presidio at the museum down there, probably best to contact me or to contact Jordan, because we're looking for folks to help with that as well.
Well, thanks, Inga, to you and Jordan and the other staff members and volunteers. I mean, it's pretty great that we're able to do Christmas in the Adobes and have all 3 city museums open. I mean, I wish state parks and some of the other places were as adaptable as we are. So do we need public comments on this, Francesca? If it's only an activity report?
Yes. To make a public comment, please raise your Zoom hand or dial *9. There are no public comments at this time.
And I would like lastly to thank Chair Wachowski for being docent coordinator for the the Presidio Monterey Museum. We appreciate you getting the museum up and running, and also thank you to Commissioner Thomas for taking up the mantle of docent coordinator.
We'll see.
We're very grateful.
Thanks, Jordan. Alrighty. I'm sorry, did you check on? Okay, there are none. Let's move on then to the strategic plan, Inga.
Great. So I think by now this document looks awfully familiar. This is just a revision based on the comments that were made at the November meeting. At the November meeting, the subcommittee, the strategic plans subcommittee brought a draft and we got some feedback. So then this is just incorporating that feedback. And I just did a little bit of cleanup to a little bit of formatting. And so basically this is an opportunity to, is it an adoption that we get to do at this point? Yeah, receive and approve. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions from any of the commissioners?
I move approval.
Bob, are you speaking, but you're muted?
Yeah.
We have to first take public comments before there's a motion. So we're looking, just to go briefly, we're hoping that the music and the art will both come back this summer.
Yeah, that we're hoping. We don't know for sure.
And what's the possibility of additional staff? Because I see Inga in almost every box.
So the thing is that we will be, I've talked to Nat, who's our assistant city manager, about what the process is for me to get the ball rolling, to ask that we add some staff. And at this point, they don't have the schedule for budget submissions, but the plan would be to ask for more staff. And my first recommendation, of course, would be to give Jordan, who knows so much about everything, a more solid number of hours in position, ideally, than just being 20 hours a week on call PTS.
So right now, Jordan, you're 20 hours a week.
Correct.
Unbenefited, yeah.
And so in the upcoming budget, Inga, you're going to be proposing that be a full-time position?
That would be a starting place, full-time, and if not full-time, we would negotiate regular part-time.
Alrighty. Can we have public comments before we have a motion?
Yes. To make a public comment, please raise your Zoom hand or dial *9 if on phone. There is no public comment at this time.
Alrighty. I think, Bob, did you have a motion?
Yeah, I'll move that we accept the strategic plan.
I'll second.
On second. You want to do roll call?
Yes. Okay. O'Neill,
Aye.
Peak,
Yes.
Sovereign,
Aye.
Thomas,
Aye.
and Wachowski.
Aye.
Thank you.
Hey, me too.
Yeah, I don't think I got called either, but the answer would be yes.
Yes.
So when I ask if they all vote, then they all answer. But when you do roll call, it's
I get confused.
something wrong with the system. Alrighty. So I take it both of you voted yes, though, right?
Unanimous.
They did. Yeah.
So our last item is the Path of History Subcommittee. We have this great document. Inga, not all of them have it, right? I don't know. Are you going to put a PDF file on our, or does everybody have the complete document or no?
I don't think so.
Oh.
Oh, do they?
Yeah. So we have this
Ah.
other detailed document. If you'd like to see it, I mean, I'll be glad to pass mine on and share it. And the three members, we have three members on our subcommittee. We could share it, or Inga could put it on on our website. But the initial discussion, so I and Tim and Bob met this week, and this woman spent an incredible amount of time. I mean, I went out with her and walked 3 or 4 times through all of downtown, and she did this incredible document. I pass it on. And we could spend a lot of time and effort. I mean, it would take months to wordsmith this and get it into a final document. But I think what she has done and what our committee kicked around is to use this as a working draft. Don't spend a lot of time on wordsmithing and doing that. But in the back of her report, she gives 2 sub areas, Colton Hall / Robert Louis Stevenson and the Pearl District. I believe all the commissioners got copies of that.
Pearl District.
Yeah.
Did
So
you
there's
get,
the Pearl District, but there's also they called Robert Louis Stevenson. I prefer to call Colton Hall. What we thought as a subcommittee is that we'd like to work and create this sub area, these 2 or 3 sub areas, Colton Hall, Pearl Street, maybe work with state parks and have them do the custom house Fisherman's Wharf with a lot of Tim's help. Tim, as you know, does tours of Fisherman's Wharf. And we have so many darn historic elements in the city of Monterey, but they're not all together. I remember when we did the walkway at Lower Presidio, I mean, we have 9 historic signs, but they're easily, one right after another. But just imagine if you go from Cupa Malera to the Robert Louis Stevenson House to the San Carlos. I mean, it is very difficult. And so the subcommittee kicked this around and we were going to throw it out for your review and hopefully consent that we work and develop these 3 sub areas that we use internet, we use the cellular phone that might even actually give not only the description of the particular site, but it might say, and from here, go to your right and go down 1 block and find the Pacheco Club or whatever. And so we're enthusiastic about creating these sub areas and working on that. And we do have a possibility that in each of the 3 sub areas, we could have a center point. In the Colton Hall, of course, we would have Colton Hall as a center point. Custom House area would serve as the center point of that area, and possibly Cupa Malera could serve as the center point for the Pearl Street. So that was our approach. Bob and Tim, other members of the subcommittee, or Inga, if you would like to add any more to that?
So the thinking, I think, was that to pursue a grant that would help us then develop 3 short walking tours, drawing upon this plan.
and it's interesting, the RLS path that was described covers a lot of the existing path, but the ideas in the draft, I think, are what are key, that we have these sort of integrated tours. And the thing that we discussed about trying to add directions to either the narrative that can be found on the internet or to the cell phone tours. That way, and of course in the draft, they're talking about having a beginning and an end, or a beginning and end at the same place if you have a circular tour like the Pearl Street proposal. But if we have the directions at each location, then any one location, and if it's circular, any one location can start them on the path. And I think that's really important, because unless we do something, well, and that's another thing that was described in the draft, is that we need more information, like at the starting point or the ending point, about not only the particular tour they're about to launch on, but where the other tours are, so that people realize there's more to do than just a couple of hours around Colton Hall or around the Pearl Street one. And anyway, that I quite agree that the draft is got plenty of stuff in it, and in effect, some standards that we need to be developing as we develop these three. The planning process, I think, has been pretty well covered, and now it's the execution that we need to do. And that's why I agree with Bill and Tim that we need to start working on 1, 2, or 3 of these things and get them done, so we then have fleshed out what our standard font is going to be used, the colors and other things, that so that people recognize them as a whole. End of sermon.
Tim, any comments?
No, I think I agree with what we just said, and I think the 3 that we've talked about are really the ones we should really focus on. I do have a particular interest in the Pearl Street one, and of course in the Wharf, because those areas are just really important culturally and historically to Monterey.
So, and I know that the city council is really interested in making sure that we tell our story, we as a city, tell our history from diverse perspectives and include diverse peoples. And the great thing about a wharf tour, one that centers down by Custom House, is you can include more of the indigenous people story there. And then the Pearl Street tour also includes the great synergy between Japanese and other groups. And so that would be, and also some of the historical events are a little more contemporary. So it's not all just ancient history or, pre-1900s as well. So.
Good. Any other comments? And nobody, I mean, the subcommittee is not saying that we're going to stop at 3. We feel there could be 6 and 8, obviously Cannery Row, Old Town, some other areas, but pick out 2 or 3 that maybe we can use as an example. As Inga said, get a grant for them. And then if they work out well, go on from there. So it's a multi-year project, a multi-area type of project. Yeah, Mike.
I'm not clear on, it's great content of what we see. What's the media for conveying that content to people who are, starting out, no background? How are we going to carry those words to them?
So I think the idea is that there'll be signage, and the draft master plan shows different kinds of signage that can be used that is consistent with what the city is using for signage. So you might just be walking along the street and boom, you see a light pole that has a big sign that shows a map, and you're here. And if you go this way, you could see this thing. And if you go this way, you could see that thing. So one thing is signage in space. And then another is brochures that would be available at Colton Hall, Custom House, different locations where people pick up historic brochures. And then there would be the use of the on-cell site that we've already developed. That's a cell phone, and also it can be used. It has maps and visuals, and so then of course our website would need to be pointing people towards it as well.
I applaud that, and I'm just remembering the process we went through, which I don't think even ever did conclude, with some of the signage that we developed for the Presidio walk, that getting the right words, you know, these days is extremely difficult.
Yeah.
Well,
I think the consensus is that the way the current budget is and the current staffing is that we have to go out and get a grant to hire a firm to put this together. And again, when somebody comes into Colton Hall, supposedly after this is all done, they would have a brochure of the Colton Hall sub area. And as Inga said, they would walk from place to place. Each place, once they get the history of Colton Hall, that will tell them where to go to the Underwood Adobe. The cell phone would actually direct them there. So, I mean, it's a work in process that we have to work with a planner, look what other cities are doing. But I think the main thing that we're proposing is not to spend a lot of hours and commission and staff time on getting a final working thing approved by the commission and the council, but to tackle these sub areas, 2 or 3 sub areas, hopefully get a grant, get a planning firm to put this together, and then we'll report back to the subcommittee and the commission. I mean, our biggest problem, you know, we all go down to City of Monterey always uses Charleston as an example. We don't have a center point for history. Now with the visitor center gone at Camino El Estero, the only time we ever had one was at the Maritime Museum years ago when state parks, and even then that's difficult because that's not the easiest place to get to. So now we're talking about 3 areas with 3 center points. Colton Hall, Custom House, and Cupa Malera. And they would share the information on all 3 areas, but they would give you the guide for that sub area.
And I think the idea too is that the process of creating these 3 areas will help contribute to the working plan. So we're not talking about creating the perfect static document first, but sort of as part of the development of the working plan is we try these 3 or so walks, and that will help develop it.
I think there's a certain amount of learning that will accrue as we begin to get into the nitty-gritty of each one of these. For instance, Inga brought up the fact that the cell phone tours can have maps and a narrative, whereas I was proposing that we have an app, like most museums have apps, and you can download it from their website, or the first thing they do when you walk through the door is hand you a little piece of paper with the URL for downloading the directions for downloading the app for that particular museum. But if we can integrate that into the cell phone tour technology, I think that would be great. But we've got to try to do it first to see if it works. So there's no point in putting that in a plan unless it's actually working. So again, I think there's going to be a great deal of learning as we actually start trying to implement these things. There's a suggestion that they should be roughly 2 hours long. And so we're going to have to get out there and walk and see how that works.
I think a lot of it, and I'm kind of new to this process, but I worked a lot with Dennis Copeland on the Cannery Row process when they did those cell phone tours. I think a lot was learned from that. And since that time, the technology has changed quite a bit now. And so like the idea of apps and that kind of thing is something most people are used to now. So I think that is the way to go.
Any other questions or comments by the commissioners?
No, thank you.
John, do you have any?
No, well, my usual question. Pat Hathaway's collection, is that found a home yet?
I know that answer, but I'm not sure I'm supposed to reveal it.
Right. What I know is that it's not coming to the city of Monterey, unfortunately.
Oh,
Oh,
That's too bad.
But I think in the long run, everybody will benefit.
Good.
but just to wrap up this item, and then we also have to take public comments on this item. Is there a consensus that to go ahead with the direction of the subcommittee and focus on the sub areas rather than focus on the master plan? Use the master plan as a working draft.
yes.
Is that acceptable to everyone?
Yes.
Yes.
Right, so public comments,
Yes, to make a public comment using Zoom, please raise your hand using the Zoom toolbar. If you are dialed in by phone, raise your hand by pressing *9. There are no public comments at this time.
okay. Good, so that ends our agenda. If you do want a copy of the detailed report, if you let Inga know if you want a full copy or you want to circulate one or if you want a PDF. Mike would like one.
Okay. I have a bunch of them printed out. Right now I'm in Mariposa, but I have a bunch printed out back in Monterey, so I could just mail a printed copy to,
Why don't you email them?
Good.
okay. The emailing is a little trickier because of the size
Yes.
of the document,
Oh,
but that's possible, yeah.
All right, Commissioner comments. John, do you have any?
None.
Impressed with the amount of activity that's gone on over the holidays. So thank you all very much.
Yeah.
Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I would just echo that. I had a great time at Christmas in the Adobes too. And so you did a wonderful job, everyone who was involved in that.
Bob, any comments?
No, I think I've said enough today.
Tim?
No, I'm good. Other than our thing on the 22nd, you're all invited to come down to the grand reopening of our museum and mural garden project.
Okay, will you get that to Inga and then she could send it out email?
I will, absolutely.
John, any comments? John Castagna?
Oh, no, I thought you already asked me.
Okay.
Still haven't thought of any comments.
No comment.
Okay. The only comment I have is a friend, the former city manager of San Luis Obispo, sent me the murals they're doing in downtown in San Luis Obispo. So I'll have the staff send this out to everybody. And maybe, does everybody feel comfortable putting murals just on for a general discussion at a future meeting and just seeing where we're going to go?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you all. Meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.